Defeat, never. Victory, forever. All you racist fucks got is a whole bunch of hate, and it'll haunt and rot you forever. The Order is based on the novel The Silent Brotherhood by Gary Gerhardt and Kevin Flynn, and this was directed by Justin Kurzel, who's done films like The Snowtown Murders, the 2015 Macbeth, and also the Assassin's Creed movie. Hands up if you remember that they made an Assassin's Creed movie. It came and went. It went like a queef in the night. This was also written by Zach Baylin, who did films like King Richard and the Gran Turismo movie. I actually forgot that movie just came out last year. It certainly got some attention. I don't know if it got the right attention, but nevertheless, The Order is based on a series of real-life events that took place in the Pacific Northwest. Hey, that's where I live. It was back in 1983, carrying over to 1984, where an offshoot of the Aryan Nation basically decided we want to make our own Aryan Nation and our own brotherhood with blackjack and hookers and a whole bunch of violence and a whole bunch of hatred and everything. And let me just say right now that before I dive into more of this movie, like the cast and stuff like that, if you agree with any of the views of these particular people, you're fucking scumbags. You're fucking goddamn pieces of shit. And I will run every single one of you motherfuckers off this channel. Because I may just be a small-time YouTuber, but I'm not going to stand for fucking hatred. Let me just say right now that this movie does sprinkle in some terms that I am not going to repeat here. Please do not repeat them if you did happen to see this movie. I was able to see this a little bit earlier because this was the Regal Mystery Movie of the week. Next week is another Regal Mystery Movie. And it definitely earns its R rating just with the language alone. So the cast actually, pretty full of talent. You have Jude Law as FBI agent Terry Husk. That is a deep cut for wrestling fans. Nobody is going to get that. There are maybe 3 people. So he's basically, put in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Oh, that is so goddamn depressing. I've been to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Not exactly the most progressive place. I mean, let's be honest. Idaho itself is not exactly progressive. There are good people there. Boy, oh boy, if you want to be in the goddamn south of the Pacific Northwest, just go to goddamn Idaho. So basically, Terry has his own troubles and everything, but he's very much an FBI veteran that has seen a lot of goddamn shit, and he is investigating Aryan Nation attacks. Mainly the fact that Bob Matthews, Nicholas Hoult, Renfield, and he's a terrific goddamn actor, I do want to say, I just want to give him a shout right there. He is leading this offshoot that basically decides, hey, we don't want to go with what Richard Butler said, and I do have to say the actor playing him actually did a really good job as well. We don't want to just use words. We want to use action and violence, and we don't care what attention we draw. We are doing it for, in their terms, white power, and that's all I'm going to say right there. So fitting that this was based out of Idaho. Now, they say, according to IMDb, they say some of it was filmed in Canada, and I think I can kind of tell some of the places where. But there are some locations I do recognize because I've been to Seattle and Whidbey Island, and there are a few shots there where I'm like, yeah, I think I actually know where that location is. I believe I've driven by some of those locations. That being said, you do have Jamie Bowen, who is a small town, cop, basically sheriff, whatever, deputy. Ty Sheridan, who was in Ready Player One. I'm really actually happy he's getting some, roles that could get him even more attention, like possibly on the awards circuit. I mean, I don't know if this is going to earn any awards, but this is the type of stuff that definitely could find a life on streaming. I think Ty Sheridan did a good job here. You also have Mark Maron, who plays Alan Barg, who's a very outspoken Denver, radio host, shall we say, who happens to be Jewish. There are certain terms, hate slurs, whatever you want to say, levied towards Jewish people. And again, I'm sorry if you fucking think that way about people just because they happen to be Jewish, not because they're awful people that happen to be of a particular faith. We can hate somebody if they are a bad person, but if you're going to hate somebody just specifically because they are Jewish or they are a different race, then you got fucking problems and you need to fucking pull your head out of your goddamn ass. That being said, Mark Maron does do a good job here. Odessa Young, who was in Shirley and Assassination Nation. I'm glad to see her getting some more roles. I basically didn't recognize her in this. Morgan Holstrom, she does a good job as Kimmy, the wife of Jamie. And also Journey Smollett, who plays Joan. And yeah, there's like, a few pieces of like, we find out a little bit more about Terry's, background and stuff like that. And Jamie's got his wife, I just mentioned Kimmy, and we also find out about the various people in this offshoot that Bob Matthews is controlling. Now, there is a book that is referenced, the Turner Diaries. And for not necessarily to play spoiler, but if you Google the Turner Diaries, you will find out exactly what, the themes of that particular book actually helped inspire. A certain thing that took place almost 4 goddamn years ago, rather, in the U.S. Capitol because of a bunch of goddamn crybaby, motherfucking morons. I'm really trying to censor myself here so I don't get in trouble. But we see robberies taking place in various, portions of the Pacific Northwest. Washington Mutual gets knocked over. And there's even stuff in Seattle that gets knocked over, and certain terrorist attacks that take place. And basically, the idea is just, using violence, basically, and, instilling fear because they're cowards. Because if you're a racist in general, you're a fucking coward. And that's pretty much it right there. I mean, you get Terry trying to basically break down this whole thing. And I do have to say also that I do have to say, like, my main criticism, and this isn't necessarily a spoiler because, like, it's throughout the entire movie. Nobody is a good shot. The good guys, I don't think, landed one goddamn shot. And I'm all for it. I'm all for having people be vulnerable. But Jesus Christ, how did these guys pass, like, the first week of goddamn training? If you can't even, you couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, as some, Southern people would say. Now, I'm not going to get into stuff about the book because I actually haven't read it. I'm thinking about actually getting the ebook and checking it out if it's available. Because I certainly am fascinated by this. I'm not going to say it's perfect. It isn't as good as Rebel Ridge as far as how it deals with the action and the racism and that kind of stuff. I feel that was a little bit more balanced. Yeah, that was a little bit fanciful. This is more reality-based, more of the 70s, early 80s cop drama throwback. Not necessarily Dirty Harry, but just under that. And I think it worked for the most part. I think Jude Law delivers a good layered performance. I thought Ty Sheridan did a good job. Nicholas Hoult, was pretty good. My main issue is that it felt busy while also kind of not, it didn't feel as focused, and it felt a little bit nerfed. It felt a little bit like sanded off, like they were afraid to dive into certain things. I'm not saying you need to show people being hung from trees. We don't need that. I mean, there were certain images, a cross being burned and stuff like that. And there was, the Nazi symbol, and there were various other things at the swastika, and I get why they went with what they went with. And there was no justification for why people were this particular way. I mean, if you're going to be that way and judge people based solely on the content or their skin tone and not actually how they are inside, then there is no saving you. Because you don't want to be saved. But it does work for the most part. I'm going to get into spoilers, but decent enough. I mean, it works for the most part. It's not perfect. It does have its issues. It does have its warts. It does have its glaring problems. I feel that there were times where it's like it tried to be a little bit too dramatic. I feel that there were, it was definitely better than the Bike Riders. I will say that much because at least while that had a more loaded cast, this at least had some consistency. It just wasn't perfect. So I'm going to get into spoilers, which really won't take very long. But nevertheless, it's in theaters in a little bit if you want to check it out. 3, 2, 1, and spoilers. So, basically, Terry ends up arriving. He has his, FBI partner that is kind of his lead because he's had some issues in the past. He doesn't really have contact with his family. He's planning on having his family come there, at least he says, but when he tries to call his family a little bit later, the number you dial is no longer in service. Bob is pissed off at Richard, so much so that when they have a meeting, Richard said, you need to not do this. You're drawing too much attention. And then he's got like eyes right on Richard, Bob does. Because he's got more people that are militants that are just radicals being on his side. Now there is a good part in the beginning where they do bank robbery. That actually is pretty goddamn good. And the bank robbery scenes actually, for the most part, work pretty well. I'm not going to say, again, perfect. There is actually a pretty nice one where they do one in Seattle later on, and that was actually pretty nice. We had a nice little bit of car chase. You get some issues between Terry and Jamie, because Jamie's more small town. He wants to help. And I thought maybe they were going to go with a route with Jamie where Jamie actually was a bit of a mole for them. I thought maybe we were going to go with that. Thankfully, we didn't go with that. But he knew a lot of the people and was eventually able to bring them down. And it's funny, what actually ended up bringing Bob down was just his own stupidity, his own arrogance. There was a point where they knocked over a Brinks truck. He dropped his gun. And also a little bit earlier, I knew the instant they showed him with, and Nicholas Hoult apparently was in the gym for most of this goddamn shoot, because the guy was ripped at one point. That's like one thing where it's like, the director's putting it right out there. How can you not notice? But he's with a pregnant girl, and then you see him with another woman a little bit later. They don't look similar enough where it's like pretty obvious he has two separate, the polygamy and stuff like that or whatever. And I don't necessarily think that's a really good idea to do that, because that could end up leading to jealousy, and that's kind of what ended up leading to jealousy, and eventually his wife would end up bringing him down. Now, Terry did, at one point, try to do something where he was, like, chasing after Bob, and actually there was a good part a little bit earlier where he's trying to, like, shoot an elk, a caribou. I think it was an elk, actually. And Bob had eyes on him. Could have shot him right there. Didn't shoot him right there. But then they're having some, back and forth and everything, because even a little bit before that, there was a chance when he was trying to break up a robbery, Terry was, and even though they had ski masks on, he could see in his eyes, he could see that it was Bob. He couldn't prove it, but they had eyes on him, they had a gun on him, and they didn't use it. And they had all this stuff set up. They were creating counterfeit bills or doing all this. There were a few busy parts that I felt they could have dived a little bit more into. I felt at times it was just being a little bit too busy. They could have streamlined it a little bit. There is one guy that joins the group that does end up actually kind of ratting them out, so to speak, a little bit. Just enough to give them a few breadcrumbs. The Brinks truck part was pretty nice. That was on like a lone California. That was like Northern California to Oregon. It was Highway 101? 101, 104? Trying to remember. Because 101 is something that runs here in Washington. But nevertheless, they do that. He drops his gun, and that ends up eventually leading to an issue. And meanwhile, there's like a congregation with Richard. He's trying to lead this whole thing. And before the stuff with the Brinks truck, we have Bob basically standing up, saying, I'm tired of this talking. What do we say? Defeat, never. Victory, forever. And then they start saying white power, white power. And then we go with the South Park thing. Hot shower, hot shower, hot shower. The idea is basically what happens is Bob and a couple others are like at this like safe house thing in Whidbey Island in this rundown area, which, let me tell you, as somebody that has been on Whidbey Island, you could drive between Deception Pass, and well, actually, you could go between Fidalgo's Bay, which is a turn just off of Highway 20. This is going to be nothing to anybody in Washington or non-Washington state, but you could go Highway 20 all the way to Anacortes, or you could turn off at Fidalgo's Bay, Fidalgo's Corner. I forget if it's Bay or Corner. I haven't been out there for a bit. You can go up. You could see some, nice places and some rundown places, beautiful lake, beautiful scenery and stuff like that. Go to Deception Pass, you go down there, and great area. Only one way, it's just that bridge. Really high bridge. But you can go down after you're going towards Oak Harbor, which is like the last, like, halfway big, that's pretty much like the only big town there on that island. And you'll see some rundown places. I'm thinking this is more, it was either in Canada or is between the end of Oak Harbor and Coupeville, which is like where some relatives used to live. Because there's some open fields and some fucking weird roads, and there are some fucking rundown barns and buildings, man. But that being said, Bob ends up trying to make one last stand. Just before that, he hands some stuff off to various, to like one of his colleagues, so to speak. It's a declaration of war. Again, this feels a little bit rushed, but He does one last stand. There's a bunch of, like, bullets and stuff like that, a bunch of ammunition. He has one stare down with Terry, and then basically gets consumed by the fire because they set fire to the goddamn thing to try to smoke him out. So he dies, and then it's a little bit, and then they have some text. It's a little bit before some other people get fully arrested. There's, Alan Bard was Denver. It was a hate crime thing because he was Jewish. He got killed early on in the movie, and he ended up, they ended up, basically, the people responsible for that got sentenced like 300 years in prison, which, don't know if you know this about the human lifespan, I'm probably not going to be able to make it through that. But, and it turns out the Turner Diaries, which is this book about white settlers trying to, instill white beliefs and stuff like that, their own Aryan beliefs. It's been used, like, for the Oklahoma City bombing. It was used for the January 6, 2021 insurrection attempt. A lot of stuff. Because people are just going to let their hate dominate because they're just fucking dicks and morons and cowards and everything and brainless, spineless thugs. That being said, so what does the order get? B. It gets a B. It's not perfect. It has issues. It has some inconsistencies. The performances work, and enough good stuff works. So, B. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Recklin. I'll see you soon.